I have a crown on my head.
Yeah, I was going to
Somewhere
say it's
there.
perfectly situated. Welcome to episode 3 of House of Fables in Conversation. Today, we are going to be talking to a best-selling author of NA and adult romantic fantasy books, Miranda Lyn. I cannot wait for this conversation. It's going to be a good one. Today, we're going to be chatting about her life as an author. And then, as always, we will move into a spoiler chat for her 2 series, the Unmarked duology, and her latest release, Till Death. So if you haven't read those books, you can still stick around for the first half of this conversation. Thank you all so much for supporting House of Fables and joining the conversation today. Please remember to like, comment, and subscribe so I can bring you more candid conversations in the future with our favorite romantasy authors. Also find me on TikTok and Instagram at House of Fables for more bookish content. Okay, let's get started.
And go.
We're going to welcome Miranda Lyn. Thank you so much for joining me today, Miranda.
Thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Well, tell everyone a little bit about yourself today, Miranda, so that we can get to know you.
Okay. This is a really hard question because I don't think I'm very interesting. So I was trying to think of fun facts about Miranda Lyn, and there's really like nothing. I'm the most level, boring human.
Well, I don't think your books are boring, so you must have something going on in there.
Like, put it all there. And so
pretty much everyone who reads in this space, we like to escape.
I know, that's just what we are as readers, right? We definitely like, I read for escapism and I write for it. So to me, not that I don't love my life, I do, but it's just not exciting. I don't have high stakes. Thank God, knock on wood. I don't want high stakes, but it's not happening. So I write them.
And what was your favorite books to read as a child, moving into a teenager? Did you always read fantasy books?
I really did. I honestly, I did. And I have the worst memory in the world. So for me, like I will read a book. If you ask me 5 minutes later what it's about, I couldn't tell. I don't know, but it was really good.
Yeah.
So I don't like I loved Harry Potter when I was a kid, of course. I went through a pretty good vampire stage for a while.
I think we all did.
We all did, right? We really, really did. And now I can see that it's coming back. Yeah. And I'm like, yes,
I'm ready for it.
Write that one day.
Oh my gosh. Day. I'm ready for your version of vampires. Give it to me now.
It's like I'm a little bit more epic than vampires, but at the same time, it's like, how do we pull? Plenty of people have done epic with vampires and other things, and I know that I could do it. I know I could do it.
Absolutely, you could. I'm there for it. When you're reading now, I don't know, I speak to some authors and they struggle to read when they're writing, so I'm not too sure how it is for you, but when you do read, do you find you're a Kindle, an audiobook, or you're always like a paperback or a hardcover when you do get the chance to read?
I am all over the place. I do find that I'm less and less of a physical book reader. Like I love to collect them. I love coming to the library, but as far as reading them, it's so much easier for me if I have I love Whispersync also though. So I will read on a Kindle and listen to it at the same time, or sometimes I'll just listen or just read. But if I can do both, it's my best. It's like a race. Can I read faster than I can? If I can, let me put this at 2.0 speed and see if I can read that fast. Yeah. And then it happens. But yeah, I love to tandem like that.
I only just started doing that this year and it changes the game. Like absolutely changes the game. Yeah. You can definitely read faster and it's like an immersive experience because you can hear it while you're reading it.
That's one thing that I love about reading. Sometimes the audiobook narrators don't really hit for me, but if I'm tandem reading it, it does not matter. Like that does not affect me. And also when I'm doing both, I think I take in more because I'm a fantasy girly, you know, so I think I do pick up on more of the details and stuff when I do that. I love world building. And so when I listen to audio by itself though, that can be tough. You know, it's hard to, when we're kind of just zipping right through and then remembering what is significant. It's easier for me to listen to audio just because I don't have time to analyze sentence structure and think
Yes.
about the way that things are worded and how I might have done it differently. And I can't
Yes.
help but do that.
Yeah.
Um,
It's your craft.
Especially if
So
I'm in, yeah, if I'm in an editing headspace, especially, it's very difficult for me to just read, but I
yes.
love it so much that it's hard for me not to. It
Yeah.
feels like robbery when I can't read. So I'm definitely doing both usually.
Yeah. So tell me, what does a day in your life look like? I know it can be different compared to whether you're in writing, marketing mode, but generally speaking.
All right. Well, generally speaking, I am a work until I go to bed girl. So I actually own another business as well.
Okay.
So I have to juggle quite a bit
Yeah.
most of the time because I am a photographer. So I will shoot at sunset most days.
Right.
So sometimes I have newborns come in during the day and that kind of sways what I have available. But it also depends on where I'm at in the writing stage. I struggle with like carving out time to plot. I'm a heavy plotter. Um, because I need that to come from a creative place and you
Mm.
can't schedule creativity.
Yeah.
So I have a really hard time during the plotting phase having a strict schedule because it's just one of the characters from Till Death, for example. I tried and tried and tried to get her backstory figured out. Couldn't do it, couldn't do it, couldn't do it. I'm in the car on the way to pick up my daughter from school and I hear a song and I'm like, that is her song. That is
Oh
her
my
backstory.
gosh.
That is absolutely, and it just built her character so much. And you like I couldn't schedule that, you know.
No.
My
So
day
you
is
had to
chaos.
run home and write
Oh,
write it
no,
all
I'm a
down.
notes on my phone person. It's
Same.
funny though, because I put so many notes on my phone and then I don't always come back to them because I have a terrible memory and I don't know I don't necessarily remember that I put them in there. I found an old note from Plotting Till Death and I was like, man, this would have been a really great idea. And there it goes. It's gone now.
Oh my gosh, that's hilarious.
Actually gonna move it into the next book though, so I'm not mad about it. That's why
No,
we
at
make
least you found
mistakes.
it. Did you always dream of being an author? And have you done any training to achieve this goal?
I don't think I've always dreamed to be an author. I definitely, when I was in high school, took, some creative writing classes and um I had a teacher one time, he was a science teacher. We had to write a paper on dirt and it was like the most boring thing. And I wrote the most sarcastic, ridiculous speech ever. And he wanted me to read it out to the class. And I actually skipped school that day. So
Yeah,
I
I
never
would have.
did. But it's yeah.
I'm
It
not
sticks
reading that
with
at
me
the
still
class.
though that in science class, he wanted me it's not like he had everybody else read their papers about dirt
Yeah.
to the class. And I
Yeah.
think it was just like such a smart ass paper. And I remember when I was a kid, I did write like little short stories and stuff. And my kids were the same way. My
Mm.
youngest just started writing this little book series when she was in like kindergarten. She was just a little thing. And then when I had my youngest child, she's 13 now, but when I had her, at 6 months old, she had a giant hole in her heart and she had to have open heart surgery.
Wow,
So
that's tough.
it was so tough. It really,
Oh,
really was.
yeah.
So I stayed home after that
Mm.
so that I could be with her. We had like a long road of recovery.
Mm.
And during that time, just started writing this.
Yeah.
It was a vampire story now that I think about that.
Oh my gosh.
It was a vampire story, and the main character's name was Luca,
Oh my gosh.
which is
I always wanted to name my child Luca. It's my favorite
I
name, but
love that name so hard.
my partner hated it. So I never got to use it. I love it for a boy or a girl, but I really love it for a girl. I just think it's so cute for a
Oh, that's
girl.
a cute girl name.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, so are we ever going to get a revised
I
version
don't
of this?
know. Probably not of that because I can't imagine that it was very good. I'm sure it's saved somewhere in like an
Yeah.
old Google email or something like that.
Yeah. What made you want to take the route of self-publishing? And did you ever query any of your books with traditional publishers?
No, I've never queried. I decided to do self-publishing because I am not patient. It takes a lot. Also, it could traditionally publishing can definitely be brutal. And I don't have thick skin. I like to think that I do, but I don't. And I give so much props to everybody that goes that route and they find so much success because I am so scared of that journey to
Yeah,
go that route. Just to hear people, it's hard just to hear the negative reviews now, but to do that in a professional space would be really tough for me.
yeah,
But also, honestly, it's the time. It's the
yeah,
time that it takes to go through. And I'm watching a couple friends' journeys through the trad publishing world right now.
yeah.
And it really does take them
Years.
years.
Yeah.
I like to be in control of everything.
I think especially if you are someone who has run your own businesses as well, you can put that
Mhm.
business mindset to indie publishing because you
Yes.
really are running your own business. You're not just writing your
Oh,
books, but you're running
absolutely.
your own business as well. And what are the best parts and benefits do you find in being an indie author?
That is a great question. I definitely do like the control that I have over all the details. It's sort of a double-edged sword, though. I love
Mm.
it. And then there are parts of it that I don't love about having all the control. Because just even in cover design, I think I know what I want. And I message my cover artist, and thank goodness she just speaks my language that makes no sense because I think I know what I want, and then she gives me that, and then I'm like, this is not it. I thought it was gonna be really great, and it's not there." And then she was like, "Just let me have it for, 3 days." And then she
Yeah.
comes back, and it's like the most beautiful, "Yeah, this is exactly what I wanted. Why did I not know this about myself?" So
Yes.
there are definitely things within the industry that make it lovely to
Mm.
have really direct contact with my ARC team and with I have a Discord server and
Yeah.
they're very active, and to be able to be so present for them is great. I like that I
Mm.
can set my own deadlines. I like that I can say, I can't do this today, and then I
Yeah.
don't have,
Yes.
so it
Yeah.
is a lot of that. Being my own boss,
Yeah.
I taking that from a different career and moving it into this one, I still like to have the control over things.
So, what do you think is the most challenging part of being an indie author then? Is it the writing process? Is it the reviews?
It's honestly, it's not the reviews. I think the reviews come at you no matter what space, no matter
Yeah.
how you are published. Once the book is out there, it's out there. I would say the marketing is really hard. It
Yeah.
is tough to be the same and different at the same time, if that makes sense. You do have to
Mm.
stand out, but you have to also follow what trends. And that is and I'm sure that you know that
Mm.
just as an influencer, it
Yeah.
is very difficult to be memorable yet also do the things that are getting views, because that's what we're out here trying to do. So
Mm.
I would say the marketing for
Mm.
sure is very difficult. It's tough. If I
Mm.
could, honestly, Sam, if I could just sit at my desk and write and plot and dream up worlds and put it on paper and then send it in an email and then just keep going,
That's what you would
I'm
do.
I'm not sure that I would choose that world because I do love interacting with the readers, but I think that that would be a much easier world than the one that I'm in right now.
Also, think though, when you say you love interacting with the readers, yes, that builds community, but that's also a little bit of a different beast, even though it goes hand in hand with marketing.
Mhm.
Like you can still
Yeah.
interact and um, have connection with your readers, but the marketing brain is another beast altogether, isn't it?
It is 100%. It is not,
Yeah,
it's not the same thing, but they're in the same wheelhouse.
exactly. Absolutely. So, your first published book was Blood of Promise, which is part of an NA romantic fantasy trilogy with a connected standalone, which is the Fae Rising series. Then you went on to release the NA romantic fantasy duology, The Unmarked Witch. And then your latest release is Till Death, which is an adult romantic fantasy standalone. Out of each of these series or standalone, what do you think has been your biggest lesson that you've taken from one to the next?
So when I wrote Blood and Promise, I wrote that without any intention of publishing. A
Wow.
friend of mine was a published indie author, and I read her book and I thought, I think I could do this. I think I could write a book because I read so like I'm an avid reader. And I had just recently within that year, maybe the year before, read Throne of Glass.
Mm.
And I knew that when I read my friend's stuff, it wasn't the direction, it wasn't what I wanted to write, but it was inspiring me to write.
Yes.
So, and then I sat down and there was no outside noise. There was no
Mm.
pressure from anybody. There was no anything that ever in my brain said that I was ever going to publish this. And so I just wrote the story for myself. Just sat down and wrote and wrote and wrote and fell in love with the ability to create and craft and problem solve and navigate and drop Easter eggs and build
Yes.
characters. We found families that you are incredible and they come from nothing. They
Mm.
come from a kernel of an idea into these very real
People.
beings that you can empathize with and
Yeah.
understand. And just that journey alone, the fact that I could do it is what came from Blood and Promise, and then Fae
Yes.
Rising as a whole. It was
Yes.
proving to myself that I could do this. After Tides in Ruin, I knew that I wanted to go witchy. I knew even writing Fae Rising that I would love to get into the witchy space. I knew that I was going to be publishing because I had already published the first three. The last one wasn't out yet when I started Unmarked.
Yes.
But so I looked at it differently because the Fae Rising was written for myself. It was
Mm.
my own story. It didn't matter how great the pacing was. It didn't matter what the romance was. It didn't matter that the characters, like, I was thinking about this today actually, and of all the books that I've written, um, the one that actually broke me the most, like full sob crying, was my third book. It
Wow.
wasn't as much as the craft grows and you learn
Mm.
and you become more connected to characters and you dive deeper, that I don't know that anything will ever come from me so strongly,
Mm.
as strongly as Fate and Flame did.
Wow.
Just because of what happens in that story and the
Yeah.
epic stakes and the battle and where we took that.
Yeah.
So when I moved into Unmarked, it was a different kind of transition because we're still staying in the romantasy realm.
Yeah.
This time we care what people think. This
Yeah.
time we are looking for the readers.
Mm.
And this time we're trying to grow and learn and write something that's a bit more maybe poetic, something that people could empathize with and understand on a different level, and something that people are already reading but in a different way.
Yes.
So that's where Unmarked came from. And Unmarked really taught me to know my market,
Mm.
you know, to really listen to what the market is. For
Mm.
when I wrote the first books, that wasn't the case, but my second books, I really did that.
Yeah.
And then Till Death, I challenged myself in a different way because I wanted to write a standalone.
Yeah.
And it is very, very difficult to find a standalone fantasy romance that is a
Yeah.
full meal. You're still
Yes.
getting the found family, you're still getting the slow burn, you get the romance, you get the full world building, and it's not simplistic, it's still
Yeah.
complex. It took me on a journey, but Till Death taught me to slow down and to really look at what I wanted in the book.
Yeah.
So Unmarked was definitely what my readers wanted, Until Death is what I wanted. And I really think that the next book that I write is going to be the marriage of the
The
two.
two. Yeah.
It's going to be the way that they kind of come together. And
Yeah.
it is
Wow.
100% like the most complex, difficult book that I have even contemplated.
Yeah. Wow.
But I think it will be incredible because of the
Mm.
lessons learned along the way.
Yeah. Yeah. That's amazing. That's so cool. What you mentioned before that you're a plotter. So,
Oh,
what
yes.
is your writing process and what is the hardest part of the writing process for you?
Oh, goodness. Okay. So, are you ready?
I am. This is why I'm here. I love this.
I am ridiculous. I've said 13 times already now that my memory is terrible.
Yes.
So because my memory is terrible, I absolutely have to write everything down. And for me, I love reading Easter eggs or the foreshadowing super early, and that can happen through edits, or it can happen naturally if you know where you're going.
Mm,
So I will plot an entire book before I ever write the first line. I will
yeah.
know the last line before I know the first line sometimes.
Yeah.
And
Wow.
I know by doing that, I'm able to look at the pacing of something. I'm able to grow the relationship
Mm,
very like surface level. And then when I'm writing, to really dive deep. For example, Till Death, I started plotting it. And I sat out on my porch and I sent it to somebody that I know and I said, "This is kind of the plot. This is where I'm at right now. I just want feedback." And this is somebody within the industry that I really, really trust. She said, "We need to change this one thing." And it was such a small thing for her, and it was like my world turned upside down for me. And so, because originally we didn't have the burlesque show. In the very first version of this book, it was a fight pit, and
ah,
it was a very different thing. And she didn't say what to change it to. She just said we should change it so that it's like something a little bit different, because we've done fight pits, right? And so immediately, the second that she said that, I knew burlesque show. I was like, this
wow.
is, oh my God, you're
Yeah.
right. We do need to do this. And then it spiraled because that world, the burlesque show made so much sense in the world that I'd already written, but I had to rewrite it. I had to replot the things that I already had.
Yeah.
So in some ways, my plotting is so great. It's I can sit down and I already know where I'm starting in chapter one and where I'm ending and what I'm building to in that
Yeah.
cliffhanger ending. So if you
Yeah.
read my books, all the chapters are cliffies, you
Yes.
know,
Makes
that
you want
comes
to
from,
keep reading the next
yeah,
chapter.
that comes from the plotting that I do. I
Yeah.
intentionally do that when I plot. And so I had to go in and like just section
Breathe.
off a part of that and replot it. Very, very in-depth process of me telling myself the story. That's, takes me, sometimes that takes me up to a month or more before I ever start writing the book. But then when I dive in and I start writing, I know where I'm going, I know what I'm doing. And don't get me wrong, the characters change their minds, and we have to make changes for their stubborn as can be. Kiersey and Unmarked was a whole thing.
Yeah.
um but they are who they are.
Yeah.
They once you start kind of building them, and you find out like this one loves pizza and that one would rather have a burger, and
Yeah.
these weird things that you don't put in your book, and then you're going into your plot and you're thinking, oh, there's no way she's going to do this, so we're just writing it and it won't happen. Like the words don't come because
Yeah.
it doesn't work for the character. And
Mm,
so they definitely turn things on their head sometimes, but we
yeah.
always get that.
Like what you were saying before, you plot meticulously so that you can hit all of those beats and have those Easter eggs, but you also have to wait for the inspiration and you have to have the characters talk to you. So is
Yeah.
it a little bit of being quite rigid but flexible at the same
Yeah,
time?
it really just depends on who you're writing. I don't think
Yeah.
it's ever one way, or, just because you're so good and you've been doing this forever, if it's not a challenge, I don't want it.
Yeah.
I really enjoy the challenge. Of course, I want to do the easy. I'd love for it to just be so easy, but I don't think that's where we get masterpieces.
Yeah.
I definitely like find my diamonds through the rough,
Yeah.
and that's intentional. I'm very, very character driven in all of my
Yes.
books. All of my side characters, everybody that's anywhere in my books, all have importance, and I never want them to just be there as a brush off last minute thought or something. I
Yeah.
know all things about all these characters.
Yeah.
So for me, I have to do them justice.
That's one of the things I love about your stories is all of the characters feel really fully realized. A little bit earlier about managing your team. So what does your team look like? Do you have editors, beta readers, critique partners? And what's your process from drafting to publication with that team?
I like to do 3 stages of editing. So for me, it starts with my plot. one or two alpha readers, just kind of depending on where those people are with their, whatever's going on in their life. And
Mhm.
they'll read it rough draft, 10 chapters at a time.
Mm.
And they're really just there to say, this is brilliant, keep going. And like, never give me the negative. I just want somebody to absolutely give me all the positive, right?
Yep.
Because that's what's inspiring me to finish writing the story.
Yes.
Then once that's done, I go back to the beginning and then I have to shred it apart. I break everything down. I know where I landed and some things that didn't work in the beginning because of the characters changing their minds about what they're going to let me do.
Yes.
So I do my own developmental edit to start. Then it
Yes.
goes to a developmental editor. They
Yep.
read it and then they are, oh, here's a plot hole, here's this like this character said something that doesn't make sense for their character, or hey, you told us about this over here.
Mm.
Developmental editing is really just to make sure the story makes sense and we hit
Yes.
those beats. The pacing is on, we answer all the questions, that kind
Mm.
of thing.
Yep.
Then I get it back from them. I take a month with it to just sort of rewrite where I need to. It depends on the length of the book because Till
Yep.
Death is so big and
Yes.
Unmarked wasn't huge, so those turnaround times weren't quite the same. After developmental, we send it to line, and then after line, we do a proofread. And
Yep.
I like to have two proofreaders. If I can have two proofreaders that have never read it before at all,
Yep.
that's ideal for me because they
Yeah.
don't have the repetitive, they're not glossing over stuff because they have it memorized at this point, which I do. I have to do the formatting. I do a lot of the formatting myself. And then I
Yep.
also have moved into this audiobook journey. And I
Mm.
really like to release my audiobooks with my books if I can. I
Mm.
don't know if I'll be able to do that with my next one because just because of people's schedules.
Mm.
Um, a lot of the professionals that I use now are continuously getting more and more successful. So I have to wait for them, which is fine. But that does slow down the process. Till Death could have been released in February. It
Yeah.
really could
Yeah.
have. It was ready to go. I
Yeah.
just waited until they could record it, which happened at the end of February into March. And then
Yes.
we had a company come in and because it's a duet narration, so they had to put
Yes.
everything together. And
Yeah.
then I picked my release date based on audio alone. Otherwise, this book would have been out in February.
I was going to ask you about that later on, but as we're talking about it now, why has it been important to you to release your audiobook at the same time as your physical?
Honestly, audiobook readers, that industry is growing so quickly,
Mm.
and I want to cater to it.
Mm.
I know what it's like to sit around and wait on a book to come out. It would be, in my opinion, 10 times worse if
Mm.
everybody else got to read it and you still don't because of it could be accessibility or just like
Yes.
availability, whatever it is. My audiobooks are wide and I'm not playing with that. If I can release it so that people can read it in that format because that's what's best for them, that's
Yeah.
what we're doing.
Yeah.
And
That's
it's
amazing.
genuinely, it's just that. And I do think it does give me the option to get it into more people's hands for ARC reads and things like that in a
Yes.
different way. This time we absolutely did 75 ALCs, which
Yeah.
are like the advanced listener copies,
Yes.
because that audience is just as important to me. That's 30% of my readers are audiobook readers.
Yeah.
So I'm going to
Amazing.
cater and I'm going to try to just even out the stakes. I
Yeah.
can't say that it'll always be that way. I'd love
Yeah.
to say that, but if I can make it that way, that's what I'll do. So I don't know if you've listened to the audio or you
Not yet.
if you did. Okay, so not I was going to say if you have, it's probably not the finished version of the audio. We added music into the audiobook. There's cello music through not the whole thing because we didn't want it to be
Yes.
distracting, but in specific scenes, the chapter introductions. And we just really wanted to take it someplace special. And I
Mm.
think that really did happen. I didn't know we were going to do the cello music when I was looking at the formatting of the book. And most of the time, I do the artwork and I do the things for the formatting. But I'm
Mm.
like, okay, well, if I'm going to have these beautiful part pages and I have my maps, I have to have the most beautiful chapter headings.
Yeah.
And Lila
I love
is
Lila.
I know she's so incredible. She's the sweetest human, seriously.
Yes.
But she brought it. When I brought up the idea to her, I said, "Listen, I want to do a gate, and I want it to sort of grow in detail by the end of the book. So we have 3-part pages. If we could just do 3 and then just make it a little more detailed and a little bit more detailed by the time that you're in the 3rd part, it's really
Mm,
incredible." She couldn't not do it for me, which I absolutely loved because she was so sweet, but she just knew what I needed. It's just
yes.
beautiful and incredible. And so the book itself, like the actual full book and the audiobook, it's an experience, and
Yeah.
it was a production. And for
Yes.
me, that's all that I wanted. I do try to do that kind of custom stuff with every
Yes.
book because it's important to me.
Is the same cover designer for all of your series?
Yeah. Uh-huh. I have.
Yes.
I
Amazing.
had a moment where I was like, maybe I shouldn't. Maybe I really do need to kind of move along, and I can't do it. I am loyal to my soul
Mm,
with professionals that I work with. I will just never leave someone if they're giving me exactly what I want. And Tara can read my brain. I swear she's got a window or something because she knows what I want better than I would know what I want. And
yes.
she never fails to deliver.
That's
So,
amazing. It's when you find those people in your team and they're also creative and you know that you can just trust them. It's
yes.
when the
Yeah.
magic really happens.
Truly. Yes.
Mm. Do all of your stories you write have similar or recurring themes, or do you like to explore really different ideas each time? And are there any of those themes that you really hope that your readers pick up on?
This is interesting because actually it's maybe a two-part answer. Yes and no, because they're so different, but they're in the
Mm,
same spectrum.
mm,
We go from high fantasy with fae and war and like dangerous world, and then we
mm,
get into witchy. So fae and then witchy, a duology, and this one it's still the fantasy romance
mm,
vibes, and we still have sort of the badass heroine situation, but it's
mm,
different. And
mm.
then we go into this gothic romance
Yeah.
that is not like they're not the same, like they're very, very different, but they're the same in some ways. It's important for me, for my readers to see strong, powerful women.
Yep.
And that's one thing that I bring into my career. It's something that I have 3 daughters.
Mm,
So for me, I will always surround myself with powerful women. I don't give a shit about men most of the time. If I have a choice, I'm going to pick a woman to work with. I've
yep.
worked with two men and my entire author career. That's down to people that are, like my influencers all the way across the board, and
Mm,
nothing against a man in this reader space, but
yes.
just me personally, I want you to see my badass women and know that that is you. I want you
Yes.
to see that the world sucks, the world is dark, life sucks sometimes, but like
Mm,
fuck it,
yep.
just you're gonna be fine, I promise.
Yes.
And that's what I breathe into my characters. Even,
Yep.
Daenerys' journey until death was very, very um lonely and
Mm,
sad. And getting into her mind was moment for me, because she just has she had a different voice and it was so strong and powerful, but she had a whole journey to go through, going from the unmarked witch with Raven and Kiersey when we got her in the 2nd book, but with Raven was so kind
mm,
and lovable to a fault and
mm.
very trusting to a fault.
Yes.
And Rhaenyra trusts nobody,
Yeah.
absolutely nobody. So it's the spectrum of characters, it's a spectrum of women, it's everywhere in everything that any of us could ever be, but at the end of the day, like, we are our own heroines, and
Yes.
that is what I want to inject into, like, I will always write that. I will always write strong female lead characters because that's what I want my children to be,
I
that's what
love
I
that.
want to be.
Yeah, I love that so much. And I am very similar. Like I love working with women. I love reading, female authors and really championing them and making sure that I shout their books from the rooftops and,
Yeah.
but reading female characters that are flawed and have struggles, but
Mhm.
you see them push forward. And that's what
Yep.
you get a lot in your books. You see them keep going and just taking each step, no matter how hard it is. What are your favorite tropes or your favorite
Enemies to lovers.
scenes to write?
Without a doubt, enemies to lovers with a visceral hate.
Yeah.
I want you to stab her and then love her. Like, and that's where we go. That's
Yeah.
what we do. I love the growth of that relationship. I think that it is so much more the passion with enemies to lovers just does something for me.
Yes. Yeah. Gets you every
And I
time, doesn't
love
it?
every time. Like even if it's maybe not as like if it could be even still instant love, but they're enemies to lovers and I'm like, "Good job, you did it. Good
Yeah.
job."
Because there's so much passion in hating someone
It's
as
the
much as
passion.
there is in loving someone.
Give me the hatred because you're right. Like there is a very fine line before I'm gonna stab you and I want to kiss you. And like I want to walk that
Yes.
line every time I open a book. Like just give it
So,
to me.
how do you make that work in your stories from the beginning to the end? Is that something you really have to look at in that developmental
Oh
edit
yeah.
as well to make sure that you're really hitting those moments, that there's enough, I want to stab you before I want to kiss you?
Well, okay, so there is like enemies to lovers and there's true enemies to lovers. And to me,
Yeah.
that's two different things.
Yeah.
Because for Unmarked, they were enemies to lovers in the fact that their history made them enemies. And
Yes.
their journey to romance was not as violent
Mm.
as Till Death, which was true enemies to lovers.
It
These
was.
two like truly hate each other.
Mm.
These two don't know each other. They don't understand each other. They just had to get over that.
Yeah.
Till Death, he stabs her.
Yeah.
You
It
know,
was,
like 100%. They are enemies and they're
yes.
not to like be enemies. And
Yes.
that is we had the slow burn. And I actually have a friend that slow burn is her absolute jam. She has like this whole big diagram for social media of like where the slow burn should happen, that we need to do this by this percentage and this by this percentage. And I was like, I'm gonna write that. I'm gonna
Yeah.
do exactly that. And we are gonna see if that's the proper slow burn. And
Yeah.
not everybody loves it because but there's such good tension and
Mm.
passion and buildup to the romance following those percentages,
Yeah.
the
It's so
enemies to
satisfying.
it just is like I just want it to burn,
Yeah.
it does. Yeah, yeah.
My perspective, I've tried to figure out why I love that trope so much. And it's about, I think, if I really intellectualize it, in, in what's that word? If I really intellectual, I can't say
I
it.
don't think that's the word. I don't know what you're
No,
trying to say,
it,
Sam.
it, oh, let's
Intellectualize?
start that again. That's the word. If I really try and think about it, let's say that.
Yeah, let's go with that.
If I really try and think about it, I think it's about really getting to know someone and them choosing you. There's
Yeah.
something
It's
about
the
that.
choice. Yes.
Like,
Yes.
no matter what, they see you with your bad and your
Mhm.
good, and they choose you. I think there's just something
Oh my God,
about
you're
that.
giving me all these quotes that are until death that are exactly the manifestation of that.
Exactly,
Yes.
which is why I
Yeah.
loved it so much. I was like,
Yeah.
yes.
Give you another trope.
Oh, tell me, what's another trope?
Found family. Found family.
I thought you might say that.
That's my second. So
Yeah,
enemies to lovers and found family. Because we go back to the characters that I love and the depth of them. And
yeah,
like I want them all to have books so I can live in all their brains and do
yeah,
all the things with all of them because I love them all.
yeah.
And so, but when I read, There are times when I read books that the found family is more like the family, the side characters, I
Mhm.
love them more than I love the main characters
Yeah.
because of how well developed and their story is that we
Mm.
get to see from an outside perspective. So if you give me enemies to lovers and you give me found family and give me some world building and a little bit of magic and some naked time, done.
We're
Like
happy.
that's the
You've got
recipe for
me.
me.
That's
Yeah.
pretty much your books in a nutshell.
Yeah.
A little bit of magic, a little bit of making time, stir it all together, and we're
Sure
good.
enough, that's it. Yeah.
How do you think social media has impacted your life as an author and your career as an author?
Oh, this is a really good question. For me, it's taught me a lot about empathy
Mm.
for people and really being able to see other people's perspective and listen
Mm.
and understand things that if I wouldn't have had social media, I maybe wouldn't have understood any of this before. It wouldn't have made sense because that's not something that I've walked through in my own life.
Yes.
So in certain ways, just in book world, to
Mm.
watch the journey of the readers and to hear things of value and things that aren't of value to them and um just the ability to listen and connect.
Yeah.
I think that social media is a quite powerful thing.
Yeah.
As an author, not just a human, but as an author, social media can make or break you. And if you are
Mm.
a terrible person, they're gonna figure it out.
Yeah.
They will break you. And if you're a good person, they will build you. And
Yes.
that is what I have learned most from social media. I have a lot of builders around me, and I'm really, really grateful for it because
Yes.
that's what gives me the opportunity to continue this career,
Yeah.
the builders.
Yeah, that's really powerful because I think it's so true because you can tell it's what it's when people say be authentic, right? And it's like, well, what does that really mean? But it comes across like be you, be who you are, listening
Yes.
to own voices, having that empathy, sharing what you love. It
Yeah.
makes such a difference. And you can see the people who are building each other up in the community and who are
Yeah.
tearing each other down.
Yes. Yeah.
Yes.
Don't think that I would be where I am right now without social media.
Yeah.
In fact, I know I wouldn't because of the women that are around me that have come into my circle. You, for example, because of social media.
Yeah.
And I owe a lot to social media, but at the same time, I have to be careful
Mm.
because it is very easy to not understand something and maybe say the wrong thing or
Yeah.
maybe get too emotional and answer something so quickly that you don't take a step back to like if they have a really valid opinion
Yes.
what am I thinking, what am I talking about,
Yeah.
that kind of stuff. So I always try to just I'm be kind and
Yeah.
empathetic
Yeah.
and quiet
Yeah.
because nobody needs my voice in most spaces. There are
Yeah.
plenty of people that have really strong voices with true experiences and
Mm.
things that I don't have experience with. And
Yes.
so social media has taught me how to be poised
Yeah.
and approach things with class, even if
Mm.
you feel like you've been wronged, if that makes
Mm.
sense.
Yeah.
Just because just because something in this space has hurt you,
Mm.
it doesn't mean that you have to wield a weapon.
Yes. Wow, I love that. That really hits. It's very, I think the longer you're in the space, the more connections you make and how you
Mhm.
can see people doing certain things. It is just sometimes, like you said, being quiet, listening, taking a step back. Is my voice valid here? Do I have anything to add? Most of the time, the answer
Yeah,
to that is no.
right,
And let's just be kind to each other because
right.
yeah, yeah, I love that.
That's why we get along so well, Sam.
We do from the very beginning.
Yeah.
I was going to ask you about the audiobooks, which we discussed earlier before, but you did mention at the beginning of this conversation about how you tend to do a little bit different things for the launches of your book. So I was involved with book 2 in the Unmarked Witch series, the Unbound Witch, where you did
Mhm.
something very different. You didn't even tell anybody that it was going up for pre-order and that it was ready, and you did secret notes. Why do you think you want to think outside of the box with these sorts of different releases? And do you think that has helped you stand out with the sea of other romantasy authors?
Yeah, I really do. I think that it makes it more fun. I
Mm,
think there's a lot of things in this space that are so repetitive that they
mm,
just don't stick with you. Had I not done that, would you remember how I launched Unmarked?
yeah,
You know, you wouldn't remember it. And
yeah,
I have authors come to me even now. They talk to me about Unmarked. You weren't with me at the time, but when we launched Unmarked, we did 9 months of Instagram games. That pre-ordered went into, like, they got to choose their coven, and then the covens had coven leaders, and they played games. They competed against each other for 9 months. They got points, and we did prizes. And then at the end, we had a winning coven, and it was this huge thing that we did for Unmarked. It was a massive,
oh my gosh,
and so because of that, Unmarked was on the board from the
yeah,
get-go. Nobody else had ever done anything like that. But I knew then my team was tired. We were exhausted. We'd done that 9 months, and I already had the next book ready. By the
yeah,
time that the first book came out, I could have literally just released the second book, and I knew um I was still wanted to do something really special, so
yes,
I did the surprise drop.
yeah,
Unmarked has a huge cliffhanger ending, and I just every day, when's book 2 coming out? When's book 2 coming out? And I just knew that the best thing that I could do is just surprise everybody and just drop it and let it run. And I could never have predicted the success that I would have had from that, because we
yes,
also did the secret envelopes.
yes,
So what we did is we sent out envelopes to influencers, and it was, will you post this, and then just let your readers know, or the people that follow you know, that they can go sign up and they can get one too, but it's a secret, don't tell anybody what's in it. And so we sent this out to all of these people, and it absolutely snowballed the way that we want, because that's what marketing is. It's not
mm,
your first line, it's building the line and the web down. It's
yes,
not just me convincing Sam to tell her readers to read the book. It's Sam's readers then convincing their followers, Sam's followers convincing their followers, and down the line. And that's what we
exactly,
built with Unmarked. And so that's what I wanted to do in a different way. So
yeah,
what we did was we sent it out and said it was just a cover reveal,
mm,
but there was a QR code on the thing, on the envelope that we sent out. And there was a note that said, "This isn't the last surprise. Here's like, go to this QR code on this day." And when you go to the QR code on that day, it's like it's the book launch. It's not even just a
yes.
cover reveal. Congratulations, you get to be part of this big thing. And it was wildly successful.
How do you come up with these ideas?
It's all part of, like, digging in and being, I don't know. I wish I knew, because have friends that are like, "Okay, well, what am I gonna do that's different?" And I'm like, "I don't know, because I don't know what I'm gonna do next."
Yes.
It's just a thing that I sit with and I try to figure it out. So for Till Death, for example, it was the massive ARC campaign. It was
Yes.
having 3 companies do signups for ARCs, not just 1, but 3, and knowing that we were gonna send it to every single person that
Mm,
signed up for an ARC, to potentially my own detriment, because
mm,
people sign up for ARCs that don't even read this genre just because it's a free book, right?
mm,
And people will sign up for ARCs, and they just do it to get a free book, and they don't necessarily read it. And I knew that going in. I knew I wasn't going to have the numbers percentage wise of my normal ARC team. My
mm.
normal ARC team is almost 100%
Yeah,
of
wow.
people go and post their reviews.
Mm,
And I knew that I wasn't going to see that when I did it this way, but I'm like, you know what? We're going to do it anyway. And we're going to do it the month of book release, which I haven't done before. I've always done it a bit earlier than that.
yeah.
And we're going to do these PR boxes, and we're going to include the audiobook in the PR boxes, which
Yes.
is not a thing that people do, you know?
Yeah.
So it's just genuinely what can I do to be different? What can I do that's going to help these people remember
Mm.
what is impactful? And that's I'm constantly chasing that.
It's definitely memorable.
Yeah, that's all I want. I just want people to remember it.
Okay, Miranda, we're going to move into some spoiler chats now for your two series, The Unmarked Witch and Till Death. If you haven't read these books, save this and watch it later when you have. Okay, so for The Unmarked Witch, what was your inspiration for the world and how the witches show their power on their bodies through their tattoos and their marks? Like, how did that idea come to you?
I knew that I wanted to do witchy, and I always do try to do different things.
Mm,
So it's important to me to do things that I don't read in other books. And I'm
yes.
not saying that this kind of thing is not out there. I'm just
Yeah.
saying that me, like personally, I haven't read anything like this.
Yeah.
And so I knew that for me, I needed Raven to be, she needed to be different. And
Yes.
I sort of knew that there needed to be a connection with Bastian's family.
Mm,
And so I took that and built on it, and I stewed and I plotted until we got to a space where they wear markings and she doesn't have any markings. And
yes.
for me, I always like to read books and write books that have the magic fully fleshed out. So
Yep.
I want to know what it feels like, where it comes from, what the rules are, like the hard rules that we can't break, and what
Yes.
are the rules that we think are rules that we do break. Um, because nobody actually knows the rules. Those are kind of the
Mm,
things that I do when I'm plotting.
mm,
So I also know a couple witches, and I really wanted to like sort of pay homage to the way that they focus on their religion and where they
yeah.
they believe that energy comes from and where magic
Yes.
comes from, and take that into a fictional world. And
Mm,
so that's where Raven owning the apothecary came from, where
yeah, I
her
loved that.
family owns the apothecary. And so it's not just magic spells that you can cast, but there are
Yes.
other ways to have magic. There's charms and there's things
Mm,
that are different, like quartz for love, and
mm,
things that are used in our world. I wanted to take into that one as well,
mm,
just to give it some good parallels to real
mm,
life in a kind of a different way,
mm,
and still really go into the point where they have actual magic that they
mm,
can cast spells that work immediately, and that kind of thing. So it was just the marriage of the two things is
yeah.
where it started. And then I wanted to play with the energy and where um someone that is a witch might genuinely feel more powerful would be if I were a moon witch, for example. If I were standing under the moon, I believe that I would feel more powerful. And that's kind of how we built the spokes of the wheel, if you will. And the way that that land is laid out, each of
Mm,
their sections of their world, their power comes from the elements.
mm. When you talk about how you brought in elements from our real world, I hadn't even clicked, but that is something that I think makes that world feel real when you're reading
Yeah.
it,
Mhm.
because it is fantastical and it is this magical world, but there's little bits that you're like, well, I've heard of that before, and I've heard, and it
Yeah.
kind of makes it more believable. And when you talk about rules, ever since I've started this and I've started talking in depth with authors, I've noticed one thing, I think, with their creativity and when they plot. Do you find that creating rules in your world is what actually helps your creativity expand? Because if you're given like a clean slate and said create anything, it can be hard. But if you are given constraints in your world, things make sense in your plot because, well, they can't do that because that would hit up against that rule and that wouldn't
Yes.
work for my story.
Yes. Rules give you the ability to close plot holes and then
Mm,
also open them if you don't remember a rule. But every aspect of life comes with rules. Whether you
yes.
realize it or not, the way that things work, they're not going to work outside of their ability, right?
Mm,
So part of world building is absolutely crafting. I think it's really the rules first, you
yeah.
know. you can do magic, but you can't do magic that you haven't learned. That's a hard
Yes.
and fast rule, you
Yeah.
know? So, okay, take that a little bit further. How would you learn a rule? Okay,
Mm,
so we have to go to a different realm to learn a rule. How do we get there? That
mm.
is absolutely how we build our world. So for
Yeah.
me, the rules are where they come from.
That's amazing. I love that. The more and more I have these conversations, I just learn all of these things, and it's so fascinating to me.
It's a little bit wild because you don't really think about where it comes from until you start asking the questions, and then you realize, "Oh, that makes so much sense." Or things that
Yes.
you don't think about in the book, like, as you're reading it, and then later you have the conversation and you're like, "I didn't even realize."
You're doing that naturally, but
Yeah.
it's what makes it believable, right? Because
Yeah.
when people say
Yeah.
things maybe aren't believable in a story, it's usually because maybe they've set up a rule and then it it's been forgotten,
Yes. Yeah.
or somebody gets to something too easily, or and
Mhm.
they haven't worked for that magic or for that skill, or without setting up their prior
Right.
backstory or something like that.
That's right.
Yeah.
Creating the rules builds the believable world.
Yes. Ah, love it. How did you come up with the different trials in book one?
Oh, I sat down and plotted, as you know, that's what I do. And I had so many ideas and I had to kind of narrow it down. I had to think about why a specific trial might be significant to the story. What
Yes.
would this actually give us that is different than this other one? Really, it really was a task to come up with the trials and do different things that
Yeah.
I had about in other stories, but still similar, still something
Yes.
that the reader could come along and understand what was happening, like the maze.
I
That's
was going to
not
say, for some reason, that one really sticks in my mind, the maze one.
And that's because it's not outside of the realm of possibility, but it was the rule
Yes.
that we put on that trial. It was the
Yes.
fact that you could not have all your senses, so she
Mhm.
couldn't see. And then we had somebody else that came in that couldn't, I believe he couldn't hear
Yes.
also,
Yes.
because they had lost the previous trial. So um, I really loved, I think I plotted that one first, to be honest, because I
Yes.
had this vision of him. Bastion is there in that space and she's trying desperately to meet her goal. Like
Mm.
he's not the end all be all for her. He's not the reason that she's there. And
Yes.
so when he is there anyway and he's like kind of breaking the rules trying to help her and
Mm.
and we still see her character though, because she's like,
Yes.
go, don't help me,
Mm.
go away and let me do it, because that's very much her. Whereas if that had been Kiersey, she would have said, okay, go left, here we go, now what? Like the different characters and the way
Yeah.
that they respond. So some of the trials were picked based on personality as well. Everything that I do, it comes back to the character.
Mm.
Even picking the personalities of the love interests,
Yes.
that stemmed from, and honestly, Bastion, I knew Bastion, the Dark King, before I knew Raven.
Mm.
And he sat with me and he was not kind and he glared at me in my brain and he was like, figure her out, figure her out. And he would just
Mm.
like stalk almost. And he was such a deep, dark presence that I knew
Yes.
him before I knew her. And I had to build his person. So
Wow.
Raven's kindness and compassion and
Yes.
understanding came from this impatient, ridiculous stalker man. I knew
Who
that
I
that's what
love.
I know. He's great. He's great, actually.
Who was the hardest and who was the easiest character to write?
Easiest, Bastion, because I knew him. He came to
Yeah.
me first. Second easiest, Kiersey, because she is the embodiment of my sarcasm.
Yeah.
100%. Kiersey is the closest character to, I want to say, I don't know what that says about me actually, now that I'm thinking about that, what that means, but she's very, she just really is sarcastic and she kind of
Mm.
has that I don't give a F
Yeah.
monologue,
Yes.
like her monologue is very F the world.
Yeah.
So she was easy for me because it's
Yeah.
very those are her walls. It's really easy to create a character that just absolutely doesn't give a shit about anything because she has her own stuff to go through. And
She's very
um,
honest.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. The
Yeah.
hardest character truly was Raven. It did take
Yeah.
me a bit to figure out Raven's voice because she is the character that had to grow, and
Yeah.
she had to get into that like raging female, but she
Mm.
starts out trusting everybody, so we had to build her to this point where she's the one that's going to burn the world down. And
Yes.
that was her like feminine rage moment where,
Yes.
I had artwork made of that because of her character growth, but she didn't start out that way. And for
Mm.
me, it didn't mean she was less of a character. It didn't mean she
Mm.
wasn't as strong, but it kind of meant that she was different than me. Whereas
Yes.
I am more, say what's on my, I do try to be more poised, but I'm definitely a person that will just kind of say what I'm thinking, and Raven
Yeah.
is not, because not everybody is Daenerys and Ara and Lyra, my other
Yeah.
characters. They're not
Mm.
screaming off the page for equality. Some
Yeah.
people are just trying to live their lives.
Yeah. So satisfying to see that growth
Yeah, oh
over
yeah.
from the beginning to the
Writing it
end as
was
well.
like, yes, writing it was really, really powerful for me. I was just like, come and get me.
Oh,
This is the moment. I've been waiting for this moment, and
it
she's
must be
ready to.
so satisfying.
Yeah, yeah.
So, what was the hardest and easiest scene to write in that duology? And was it when you killed Kirsty and Bastion?
Bastion was always gonna die. He was always gonna die because he was a jerk to me when I first met him. So that was 100% the plan. No, I
But
think
Kirsty, oh, you got me with that one.
that was probably the hardest scene to write, and it was because I so I have to go backwards. Let me
Mm.
talk about Fate and Flame a little bit.
Yes.
That book will break every bit of your soul into all the little pieces. 100%, it is the most, for me anyway, personally,
Mm.
that book is devastating.
Mm.
And we get there in the end, but it's a very bittersweet ending. And I sobbed like a mad woman writing Fate and Flame. And
Yeah.
then there's a scene in Fate and Flame that also happens in Tides and Ruin. And because those books happen at the same time as each other.
Yes.
And again, I sobbed and sobbed. And then I got to Kiersey's death, and I love killing a character. Like I am here for it. I want to do it. I want you to feel it because that's how I know that I got you. That's how I
Yes.
know that your emotions are in this book. If you're there with me and you're and even if you're not crying, but you feel something, I did
Mm.
my job.
Yes.
So when I got to that scene with Kiersey, it didn't make me cry the first time that I wrote it, and I thought I was broken, and I sat on that scene. I usually write a chapter a day. It's 2,500 words a day. That's my goal. And 3 days it took me sitting with that until I realized that I forgot my own emotions. I was in Raven's mind, and I had been writing it from her mind, and she was going through so much that I wasn't giving Kiersey that moment. And so
Yes.
I rewrote it and walked through second by second until I was absolutely sobbing, because I remember there are lines in there that came afterward, and when Raven is like making her these promises, she's like, we'll go home, we won't do this anymore. And those things came after, and those were for Kiersey. And as soon as I made that scene for Kiersey and not for Raven, it totally like took that scene to a new level. But it was the hardest for me to write because I didn't sob the way that I thought I would. And then, but eventually I did. Eventually it did break me, but that one just needed some extra love. I needed to,
Yeah.
I think I was just trying to move through the paces the first time.
Yeah.
And then the second time when it came back through, I wanted to feel it. I wanted to be broken, but it was a
Mm.
little bit harder because I knew that she was going to come back. And so I wasn't as worried about it. I wasn't as broken by it because I knew she would come back and I knew how she was going to come back. And I knew that it was going to be okay. And I didn't want to know that in that moment because I
Yeah.
think it would have that, and that's what I ended up doing, where I went into, looking at it from Kiersey's perspective. They don't know what's happening. And that's how I
Yes.
was able to write the scene more in depth.
So if that was the hardest scene, what was the easiest?
Um,
Do you remember? Tell me.
I didn't think about this until right now.
I love
Normally,
it.
listen, normally I hate writing smut. Like I just don't do it. I save it all for like the last thing that I have to write and I like
Really?
trudge around. Oh, I hate it. I really do.
Oh,
I love to read it, but it's like I don't want it to be technical. I want to just read it and not have to think about where the body parts need to be.
because it's almost like a fight scene, right? You have to really think about the
100%.
staging.
Yeah, it's not
Yeah.
sexy when you're writing it. When you're writing it, you're like, what is the elbow? When on the bed, and it takes away from it. So, but the icicle scene, I don't know why. I don't know why. That one was like it was this hot and cold moment, and it was so easy for me to write.
I
There's something wrong
love
with me.
that.
There's something
We're
wrong with
not
me.
going to go into why that was the easiest scene you wrote. We'll just
We
take it
should
on
not.
face value.
Yeah, that's a good solid plan. I like it.
You mentioned that you were always going to kill Bastion. Was that always the cliffhanger of book
Yes.
one?
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I always knew that he was gonna die in that moment and
Yeah.
yeah, and not die, but die, like I
Make
knew
us
that that
think.
it's funny because I have readers that have messaged me after they've finished the duology and they've asked, "Is Gray always Bastion? Was that always the plan?" And I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, I took all that out of my pocket when I wrote book two.
Yeah.
Go back and read book one, knowing the truth, and it will be so glaringly obvious to you that you're
Yes.
going to wonder how you didn't figure it out in the first place.
Well, that moves into my next question, which was
Yeah.
how did you hide Gray being Bastion in book one? Was there certain techniques? And did you have to edit those scenes with Gray and
Yeah.
Raven really like nitpick to make sure you were giving enough?
Two developmental editors during that time,
Yeah.
specifically for that reason, because I did not want it to be glaringly obvious. I wanted exactly where we landed. I wanted it to be a situation where, um, if you do go back and read the book, you're like, how did I miss this? But I didn't want it to be so on the page and obvious the first time through. And there
Yes.
were some changes that we had to make. Um, just in that, the color of his eyes. I was going to make their eyes the same color because they're family. And it was like, I can't. That even just that one simple thing will make it obvious and it doesn't need to be the way it is. So
Yes.
we changed that. And then making it so Gray was very almost dull in the scenes with Bastion so that no one was overseeing the other, or they weren't like
Yes.
the reader wasn't necessarily looking at that relationship too hard. We knew he
Yes.
was there. We knew he was in the same room. That's all we needed to fool you. We didn't
Yes.
necessarily need to see their dynamic beyond that. So
Yes.
yes, there were things along the
Yeah.
way that were really like, can you tell? And I will say that the first time the first developmental editor read Unmarked, she had no idea and I did not tell her. So, and I didn't want her to be able to figure it out. So
Yeah.
I had gone through, oh no, that was the second one. So I went through it with the first one and we
Yes.
picked at all of those scenes and we
Mm.
made sure that they were very, very clear
Mm.
but confusing, if that makes sense. Like, I
Mm.
definitely wanted there to be a relationship between Gray and Raven because Bastion would have never not had that.
Yes.
And a little bit flirty, so that it's like kind of confusing and there's something here, what is happening situation. And then so we cleaned it all up really well. And then the second developmental editor got it. And she did not have a clue. And that is all that we wanted. That's all I wanted. I just
Yes.
wanted read it and don't know, and we'll see how it goes. And that's why it played out so well.
I think for me as a reader, reading book one without knowing anything and just reading it as it was, the reason I thought Gray had such character development was because I thought you were trying to give us the idea of a second love interest.
I know.
Like,
Yeah.
could this be? But I was like, it wouldn't. He's blonde. Like the other guy has dark hair and wings. Like, so I was like, I never thought of him as the love interest, but that's what I thought you were doing. And I
Yeah.
think that's where you fooled me because I never looked at it as are they the same person? I looked
Yeah.
at it as like, is
Could
this
he
the
be?
guy? Could he
Yeah.
be? My
Yeah.
friend, who is an editor, did get it, but she wasn't sure. She was like, I think this, and she read it after me. And I had read book two. So
Yeah.
I knew it then. And she was reading book one, going, I think this could be this. And I was just like, how did you pick that up? But I guess as an editor, that's her, bread and butter, isn't
Yeah.
it? She's
'Cause it
looking at
is
all of
in there.
those things. And
Yeah.
that's right. And now, probably, if I went back and read it again, I'd be like, it's right in my face. How did I not pick that up?
Absolutely. There's a part in there where and it's been so long since I've read this,
Mm,
obviously, but I think it's Kiersey and Gray and Raven, and they're talking about Kiersey's kind of like he's definitely looking at you, and she's like he either wants to kill me or have sex with me. It's something like that. And
mm.
Gray is like looming over her shoulder, and he's like definitely the second one. And I'm like, I almost took it out because I almost thought like this is going to be the moment where they realize that this is him saying that, and nobody like picked up on that. But there are things like that the whole time. And if you look back at the crafting when they're putting the masks together, he built her a crown.
Yeah.
And it's like the whole thing is manifesting. So the
Yes.
whole point of that is like he built her a crown with the black and the white. Note the cover
Yes.
color.
Yeah.
And it's supposed to be a mask, but the mask gets broken, and then
Mm.
we have the crown, and he crowns her. And
Yeah.
it's just the very subtle little things like that that absolutely intentional. Absolutely.
When those things are done really well, when they land, it just makes you take stock of everything you've read. And that's when you know a
Yeah.
book really hits it because it makes you go, oh my God, how did I not see that? Like that is like it's right there. Especially
Yeah.
for fantasy romance readers that read a lot in the genre, they can pick up on where a trope's going to go, what's going to happen. And there's something that's reassuring about that predictability when you're reading. You read to escape and to know where it's going
Oh,
to
sure.
end.
Yeah.
But it's the in between part, not the beginning and the end. It's how you
Yeah.
get there that makes it really memorable, I think. I'm going to ask what your favorite spy scene was to write. And was it the Grey Bastion Raven scene? But you did mention before that it was.
Let's talk about that because that
Yes.
scene was the very last thing that I wrote for the duology. It
Really?
was never originally in there. Um, it was actually a scene with shadow play, and
Yes.
it was full touch and no sight at all.
Mm,
And um there was quite a bit more spice in Unbound in the first draft. And my
yeah.
editor came back and they were like, we don't need this much of it. It's not true to my writing style
Yeah.
because I do write spice, but I write a lot of story and a little bit
Mm,
of spice, and I love that. I don't
yeah.
like the pressure to write spice. So they were like, just think about that and where you want to go in your next books. If you don't want to have that level of spice, then you don't need it here.
Mm,
And I loved that because I didn't want to have that level of spice. I just really felt like that was my over delivering to what the audience wanted.
yes.
Um, but then they came back and they said, however, we want gray smut or we're not finishing this document.
Yeah.
And I was like,
You've promised the reader, you've given
I
us
know,
the
I know.
idea.
And then, but it made it really incredible to write it
Yeah.
because of the idea of which one is coming and which one is going, and she needs to accept that it's two, like they're the same person. It
Yes.
helped the story actually
Yeah.
develop, which I didn't even consider that the first draft that I wrote it,
Yeah.
but I was like, yeah, this actually is really powerful and does make sense for the long run. So I took some little pieces of that and then kind of spread it through the rest of the book later. But
Yeah.
um that scene never actually was supposed to go in the book.
Does show, like you say, that it's her accepting him, the forgiveness, the trust between the two of them, her being able to
Yeah.
rely on him in whatever form he is taking. And the way you talk about how you write spice in your books, that's how I love a slow burn and I love spice in my books. But yeah, you need it to be a part of the story and to make sense for the characters and the journey they are on. And it's funny how this little scene that your editors told you you had to write actually does really make sense
It totally did. Absolutely. It
in the
made
character
sense for
arc.
the story. And it was just one of those things that I didn't really think about. And then
Mm,
when I wrote it, as I was writing it, I just kept thinking, like, this is what it was missing anyway. It's not
yeah.
about the spice here. And that's what I love about spice scenes when there's more to it than just like, you know, the thing.
The thing.
Yeah.
Things.
Things and holes, all of that.
Are you surprised by what people's favorite scenes are or their reactions to certain parts of that duology?
No, actually, because I think that most of the readers' favorite things are my favorite things. Occasionally, that I'll get tagged in like a quote or and
Mm,
this is with all of my books
mm,
that I'm like, I wrote that? It shocks me a little bit. And then I'm like, that is actually very profound. And it makes me a little bit proud. And then
yeah.
like when I sent you Till Death and I said,
Mm,
Sam, I need you to just get the marketing quotes out of this
yeah.
because I can't see like the tree from the woods, what's
Yes.
that? Something
Yeah.
that's I was just struggling. I just
Mm,
absolutely felt like everything in this book is very powerful, but
mm,
it's emotionally taxing. And now I have it memorized and I don't know what are my selling points.
yes.
And so when I got that document back from you, I just sat down. I like got a coffee and I turned off the lights and I just sat with my laptop and read through those moments. And really, it was the first this is gonna be okay moment when I like, after I'd, written Till Death and been through the paces and,
Mm,
you go through the edits, and the edits are just looking at everything that's wrong, and you're at this
yeah.
point, you're not really getting any kind of powerful feedback. I had gotten the feedback from my alphas in September, and
Yeah.
then nothing, so to get that back and feel like these are exactly what I wrote them to be, they struck you in the same way, to
Yes.
me, that was probably a more profound moment for me than when you just post something,
Yeah.
because all of the things that I loved were on paper for you. And
Yeah.
that it just made sense. Like it made it so that I felt like I did what I had set out to do. It's the
Oh.
same thing when a reader creates like an aesthetic reel and
Mm,
they do a better job than I do. And they pick the scenes that are exactly as if it's like they crawled in my mind and
mm,
put them into these reels over and over and over again. And I'm like, that wouldn't have happened if this story wasn't delivered exactly as I'd planned for it to be. And that
yeah.
I got that same feeling when I
Yeah.
read through the quotes that you'd sent me, like, this is exactly what I'm trying to sell.
That honestly makes me so, so happy because I can imagine how hard it would be as an author, pouring your heart, and then it is critiquing. It's critiquing, it's critiquing, it's fixing. And by the time you're putting it out into the world, some authors even don't even read any of their reviews or do anything. It's like, how do you even
Oh, I
know? Yeah. So how do you even know like how it's being
know.
received by people?
Yeah.
So to get that feedback and know that, like you said, pulling little lines out sometimes, especially for like marketing and looking at it like I did from a marketing perspective about like what in this scene really hits and shows the emotion of that scene and pulling it out,
Yeah.
and you feeling like that is what your intention was. That's,
Right.
yeah, that's amazing. That makes me feel so happy, and I'm so glad I was able to do that for you.
And I'm so glad that you did that for me because it did more than just me reading through lines that you liked. It genuinely gave me a different, it gave me a boost, it gave
Yeah.
me the feeling that it was going to do the things that I hoped it would do. Just because our brains were so aligned and the things that were important, but yet you picked out things that were so relevant to the story that I wouldn't have chosen because I'm not looking at it from a reader's perspective or even from a marketing perspective. I'm just
Yeah.
looking at the story as a whole.
Yeah.
So for you to dive in and pluck those things out so meticulously and so flawlessly, it just really did change the way that I looked at the book.
Oh, I love that so much. You're gonna make me cry.
You did a good job, friend.
I had good material to work with. Moving on to Till Death. This world is very unique. I haven't read anything like it before. Dark, gas lamp, gothic romance vibe. But as you were talking about before, you put in that burlesque Moulin Rouge vibe, which is almost contradictory to the two, but at the same time makes so much sense. Because
Yeah, exactly.
when you do have such a dark world, it is so natural for people to create theatre and fun and escape. So,
Yeah.
how did you come up with this initial world?
Okay, so initially the world was, have you seen uh the Six of Crows? It's not Six of Crows though. Shadow and Bone on Netflix.
Yes, I did watch the first season. I haven't watched the
Yeah,
second
so
yet.
the Six of Crows side of that
Yes.
world,
Yes.
I loved it. Like just the
Yes.
the vibes of the world before they
Mm,
go out and they're in like a different space. And I've not read Six of Crows. I own it, but I have not
mm,
read it. Um, so I knew like, man, this is really cool. They definitely have like, I mean, they have guns in that world, and I didn't want to have that, but
yeah.
I like it was the gas lamp, but we still got the horse and carriage, but we had like
Yes.
top hats and
Yes.
canes and this like whole it was such a vibe. And I
Mm,
was like, I can write a world in this and do it well. I know I can. And
mm.
then originally I had written the burlesque show to be a fighting pit, right?
That's yes.
And but then we changed it and I
Mm,
came up with burlesque show. And good Lord, I'm so grateful and glad that that happened because it completely changed so much of drafting through the book and where the book went and how it ended and it's darkly theatrical and it's
mm,
oh like even in the writing style just because of the like what those vibes injected into the story
mm,
just to write the character the maestro
mm.
his introduction to those scenes and to really like dig deep. Like I've genuinely, it's the first world that I've crafted that I felt like I put my damn talents into. And
Yeah.
I did because it was just it was so vivid in my mind. And then to make it theatrical, to be able to build on top of that. You
Mm,
don't just have a world, you have an absolute show. And it's
yeah.
just I've never read anything like it, and I hope I did it justice because I would love to see more.
It was amazing. I absolutely loved it. It was so different, but at the same time made so much sense.
Mhm.
And so you had a assassin princess female main character who gets tricked into marriage that creates one of the best enemies to lovers dynamic I have ever seen between two main characters. So what came first? Was it the setting or was it that relationship dynamic?
So, on it actually the relationship, this is a great question because the very, very first, like when this story started sort of scratching in my mind, it was a genie and we had keepers of the lamps, and we had it was like genie meets Viking, if you can stay with me there. And the main character didn't know she was a genie, and the she thinks that she accidentally marries the wrong man, which was always going to be what happened. And the man that she married was actually the man that was hunting her. And the Vikings were the love interest world.
Yes.
And um she thought that those were the ones that were supposed to protect her, and she gets tricked, and that's where this story like very first started. And
Wow.
then I was a little bit worried about doing anything with cultural appropriation. So I wanted to shift the world. And
Yes.
then I realized that I didn't want to do Genie because I felt like we absolutely do have an amazing community that can write that and do it probably much better, more justice than I'll ever be able to do. And I realized that genies are not real, but the Arabic culture is real, and to be
Yes.
in that space, and somebody is going to write that book one day, and that's the
Yeah.
one that I don't want to write it.
Yeah.
So I thought I need to go darker, and I need to do something that's more gritty, and I
Mm,
need to do something that is just more
mm,
and appropriate for me to write. And
mm.
so, and I know that when we write fantasy, we are allowed to write worlds that don't exist, and they wouldn't be Arabic because it would be completely different in a fantasy setting. But that's the closed mind way of looking at it. I feel like,
Yes.
that's not necessarily listening to the cries and what people are
Yeah.
trying to say. So I just said that's fine. Okay, I know what I want to do. How can
Yes.
I change it into something that is going to speak and be loud still? And then we went into this Death Maiden in a world of immortals, a
Mm,
single assassin in a world of immortals. Fantastic.
mm.
She's going to marry the wrong man. She's going to get tricked into the marrying the wrong man, and she's going to freaking hate him. Why would she hate him? And then, we are discussing spoilers at this point.
Yes, we can.
Um, I didn't know that she was going to kill her dad until 3 sentences before it happened. And I typically am a heavy, heavy plotter. I did not know it
Yeah.
was death came in and he gave the name and she walked up that aisle and killed her dad. And I was like, yes, this is why we let our
I
characters
just
run.
got, I just literally got goosebumps when you said that.
That is what happened to me when I was writing it. I was like, oh shit. I can't believe that I'm about to write this. And it absolutely happened the way that it happened. And it solved all my problems. And I
Mm,
didn't know I had those problems because
mm,
then as I was writing, I was thinking, oh, well, I would have had to figure out so much stuff with her father's like kingdom. And
mm.
I didn't have to do that because he was no longer a problem,
Yeah.
but I did not know. The only thing I knew was that he hit her and
Mm,
she belongs to death, and Death's coming in here and he's going to be pissed. So I just wrote the words, and as it came out, it ended up being Oren's fault, you know?
mm.
And that is where he broke her world.
Yeah.
He made her a spectacle,
Mm,
and it truly destroyed her, which I
mm,
think I loved because we came full circle when she chose to become a spectacle for his freedom. You know,
mm.
that was where that all kind of
Yes.
ended. But I
Yeah.
didn't know where we were going when that happened. She just walked up that aisle and killed her dad. And I was like, oh, Jesus.
It's so powerful, but also I was like, yeah, I hated him.
I know. He deserved to die.
But yeah, it did definitely breed so much animosity between the two. Like you said, making her a spectacle. And in the beginning, you get this feeling of her where she has to do these things to survive and she doesn't want to do them. And she doesn't want to be seen by people. She doesn't want to be seen in this way that she is depicted, and everyone hates her because she is the lone assassin that could come for them at any time. And for her to have to do that in front of all of those people, yeah, it's very powerful. It's funny that for such a plotter, how that came to be. Such an
And that
impactful moment.
happens. It does happen
Mm,
all the time.
mm,
Very frequently, I'll have something completely plotted and something in the middle changes the way that we land at the end, but it's
yeah,
always better that way. It's always the way the story is supposed to go, and I always
yeah,
let them do that. And then I have to figure it out, and I have to pick up the pieces, but I love those things
yeah,
because like you just got goosebumps just hearing me say it,
yeah.
so you know that that was the right decision.
It was absolutely. So you really take time to develop your side characters. We were speaking about this earlier, and I can always be guaranteed found family in your books. And it was really strong in The Unmarked Witch, and it was also really strong in Till Death. And you mentioned this before, it was a slow burn with the found family as well. They really had to go through things to learn to trust each other. Why is that such an important part of a story for you to write in your books?
Because I think that every element of a story makes it a masterpiece, right? Anything that is like half done is not developed enough, in my opinion. You
Mm,
could have done more. That's what I would say to myself if I had characters that didn't have the full range, that
mm,
I wouldn't have done it justice. And they do all speak to me and I love them all. And even in the bad guys, I love them, I don't just have bad guys for the sake of having a bad guy. The villain
yes.
is the villain because for reasons. And in his own mind, he's not a villain. Like
Mm,
he's the hero of his own story. But that's the truth for every single one of my characters, not just the main character and her love interest. It's
mm,
everybody. Because when you write these dark, broken worlds,
mm,
everybody's world is broken and
yes.
you need to have the growth with them. And I thought it was really important with Deianira's story that we dig into not just her being able to trust them, but
Mm,
them accepting and not trying to change her. And we do really get that in the birthday scene where they're giving her gifts. And none of the gifts are things to change who she is, but it's an acceptance of who she is.
mm,
And for somebody that never had a birthday,
mm,
imagine how powerful that would be for her. And why would that matter if the side characters weren't impactful
yeah,
and developed? But
yeah.
I also think that it makes it feel like home. And I know that
Mm,
sounds strange, but when you build characters that you truly think that your readers love and understand,
mm,
picking up that book again is like home. You
yeah,
know there's a father figure in there, you know there's a
yeah.
sister figure in there, you know that you're going to get something and somebody in here
Mm.
to connect to. And every book, we're just building a home.
And I think as well, when you were talking about how lonely the FMC was,
Mhm.
building that found family around her and her not being fulfilled with just the love interest, but being fulfilled with all of those friends and
Yeah,
that found family that she made as well really does, like you say, make it feel like home, make the story feel well rounded. You're not, she's not just fulfilled from love. And
yeah,
I really appreciated that in this story. Other thing I found with Till Death is it's very fast paced in the plot. There is a lot that happens.
yeah.
Did you have certain scenes in your head from the beginning plotting stages that you were like really excited to write? Was there anything that you were like, oh, I can't wait to get to that scene and write that
Yeah.
big scene?
The biggest scene that I knew I wanted to write was the second dance challenge, the second show where they have to dance
Yes.
together. And I knew because as soon as the burlesque came to me, the Moulin Rouge Roxanne with the big roaring voice in that song and like the anger and the tension. And I'm like,
Yes.
this is this moment in this book. It's the naked covers.
It was,
Shows it.
Gosh, I love it. It's one of the scenes I said to you, I was like, you need to get this done in artwork. And you were like,
Yeah.
well,
I already I knew that scene before I wrote it. I knew it was going to happen, and I was so excited to write it.
yeah.
There were some scenes in the end also that were very I was excited to write them as well. One of them was Daniera releasing her mother, and that
Mm,
seemed so impactful
mm,
only because that was not a character that had a really big impression in the story or in her life, but her ability to let go. You
mm,
know, that for me I was really excited to kind of get to that moment.
mm,
And it wasn't a huge thing that happened, but it absolutely was. And then when we learn about Daenerys and Hollis's connection, that was really
mm.
important to me too.
Yeah.
Um, when I originally plotted the book, I didn't know that Hollis's sister was the previous Death Maiden. Um,
Yes.
that just came out. He just said that, and then everything made so much more sense about his character.
Yeah.
And I was like, of course. I
Mm,
didn't, they teach me as we go. They tell me things that I don't realize. And then, but when I realized that, because he was always such a big character in my mind,
mm,
I always knew that he would be so powerful for her in a
mm,
way that Orin wasn't,
mm,
because Orin was able to fulfill her need for love, but her love from Hollis is a totally different kind of love. It was something that
yeah.
she'd never experienced. She
Mm,
maybe would never experience it again in her life, but it was
mm.
immediate acceptance and understanding, and there wasn't a single other person that gave her that.
Because we talked about what she was brought up with and her abusive father, and then having to kill her father as well at the very beginning of the book. It is so healing. So it's funny that those two plot points came to you as you were writing it, but they are so interconnected at the same
Yeah,
time.
that's what we get when we fully develop our characters to a point that they are, you know, so meaningful to the story. They're exactly what she needed in her
Yeah.
life
Yeah.
to fulfill her arc, if
Yeah.
that makes sense.
Do you think was your hardest and your easiest scene to write until death?
The easiest scene for me to write was the her killing her father, because I let them have control of that scene, and it went to a place that I wasn't expecting, but when you let go and you let them, they do incredible things. And I loved death creeping out of the crack in the church. I knew
Mm,
those scenes were going to happen before I had the book plotted. You know, like those were some of the first scenes that came to me. Her
yeah.
the door slamming open at the back of the church, and
Yes.
that whole thing. So
Yeah.
for me to finally be able to put that on paper, incredible. For me to write the burlesque, like the shows that she
Mm,
was in, so fulfilling. Um, when she burns that fucking stage down,
so good. So
loved
good.
it, loved it.
Oh,
Hardest scene for me was the whipping scene toward the end of the book.
yeah. I thought it might have been. I had a feeling about that. That was, yeah. It was uncomfortable to read in a way that it's supposed to be.
Yeah, yeah. It makes me feel emotional right now just thinking
Yeah.
about it because
Mm,
of like at that point in the story, the journey that she was supposed to have taken, we were supposed to be over that kind of stuff. You know,
yeah.
we were supposed to be beyond it, and yet she still had to go through it. And it was just rough, you know, and even in that same ballpark, when she goes to the death court and she's sitting in, I want to say it's a dungeon, but it's not a dungeon. They get put into this room,
Yes.
and it's Ezra and Paisha and Daenerys. She has to watch herself like fight with herself to not kill her best friend. That
Yeah.
was incredibly hard to write because I knew that she wasn't going to, but I needed her to
Believe that she could.
remember her family and
Mm,
remember the growth that she's had and who she
yeah.
is and why she's not who they say she is, and to feel that light power, you know,
Mm,
that, but then to have the door open and hello little dove, everything in that moment just incredibly difficult and satisfying to write at the same time.
Every single scene in that book, it was hit a lot of feelings for sure. And that's, I think, a strength of your writing. You can have a lot of plot, but you also really inject a lot of emotion into it as well. To fit all of that into a standalone, like
I don't
crazy.
know. I know. I don't know how I did it. Some kind of magic.
You're doing a series of interconnected standalones for this
Yeah,
now. So there is a book two. Are you writing that currently?
I am. Yeah. Yeah.
Can you tell us anything about it, or is it all still a secret?
It is all a secret. I can tell you that it's Paisha's book.
Yes.
It's called Nevermore.
Mhm.
It is quite honestly the most difficult book that I've ever even considered writing
Wow.
because of what we're going through and because of who
Mm.
Paisha is as a
Yeah.
character. Actually, yesterday I had to write a scene um, that may never go in the book. And
Mm.
it was the scene where she meets the maestro and when she's a child and why she shuts down emotionally and why that is her character. And she's tough, man. She's going to be incredible. I love her, but she's tough.
Yeah. If you were to look at all of the characters you've written in your books, who is the hardest? Do you think it's Paisha?
Oh yeah. hmm
Yeah.
I do think that each of them came with their own challenges.
Yeah.
Um, like I said earlier, Raven is just really demure.
Mm.
She really, like, not in a bad way. She just
Mm.
genuinely has a really kind
Heart.
heart and
Yeah.
she's easy. She's almost naive a little bit. She was easy to just trust people because she believes in people.
Mm.
And that's part of like a vulnerable side of me because I
Mhm.
am a little bit that way. I
Yeah.
believe in the good of people. And so we're injecting that into each of our characters, like in
Yes.
different ways. They're pieces of ourselves. And
Yeah.
those tend to be the hardest ones to write. And because
Mm.
of some of my past
Mm.
and my childhood and the struggles that I had that are similar to Paisha's, it's very difficult for me to dive into her
Mm.
character because she does what I want to do and just shut down, and she can't because we can't write a book like that. She needs to start speaking. So
Yeah.
I really think that the story's incredible. I know where it's going. I know what's going to happen.
Mm.
Need that girl to open up.
I'm excited. I'm so excited to read it. Who's been your easiest character to write, do you think?
Ara, my very first character,
Yeah.
because I didn't have the outside world. I
Yeah.
didn't have any voices from, readers, which is not
Mm.
necessarily a bad thing, but it's just the fact that they're not there at all. When I
Yes.
could just sit down and write, and it didn't matter what I was writing because I wasn't writing it for anyone. I was just writing it to see if I could do it.
Mm.
She was so easy. I would say probably Ara easiest, Paisha hardest.
And I know authors, like you just said before, have to put, I think, a little bit of themselves into every single character that you write.
Yeah.
Which one do you identify with the most out of all of your series?
I feel a little bit, this is such a strange thing. I feel a little bit like a chameleon sometimes because
Mm.
I am not one thing.
Mm.
I am a range of things and pieces, and all of my characters are too. And um I can definitely be like poised and professional and kind, and I can also talk a lot of shit. And
It's
I can
dynamic.
I'm all of them. If you put them in a blender and mix them
Yeah.
up, like there's a little bit of assassin in me. We don't even know. Like I probably killed someone before.
I love it. Thank you so much for your time today, Miranda, and for being so candid with me in this conversation. It has honestly been an absolute joy to hear the way you plot your story and create your characters and your worlds. And I just want to thank you so, so much for giving me your time today.
You are welcome. And thank you for having me because sometimes just speaking to someone like this and being reminded of the journey that I've been on has kind of started some wheels turning in my own brain as well. So
Oh, good.
thank you for asking me to do this. And I wish you all the luck. I truly hope that this is just a booming success for you.
Thank you so much. And I cannot wait to read book 2 in the Till Death world. As soon as it's ready, my email is open.
No pressure.
And I want to thank you all for watching today. And I will see you for our next conversation where I talk to bestselling author of the Kingdom of Lies series, Stasia Stark. See you next time.